There's only been 7 times in NBA history when the #1 pick got traded on draft night, or around the time of the draft. Of course, that makes sense. It rarely happens because the #1 pick is the most coveted asset every single year. Year after year, we hear rumors about teams with the first pick trying to shop around and listen to offers. But in reality, the chances of actually trading it away are so slim. In these 7 times when the first pick did get traded, how did it turn out? Did those teams regret trading it away? Or was it worth it? In this video, we're gonna dissect those 7 times where it happened and break down if they made the right choice. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and let's start from the very beginning. In chronological order, from the first time a #1 pick got traded until the most recent one. Without further ado, let's begin. 1950, Chuck Scher. Back when the NBA was in its infancy, teams were still struggling to keep their franchise afloat, to not go into bankruptcy and see their team fold, which happened quite often back then. Usually the best way to do that was to draft a local star, regardless if he was the top prospect, because most fans in their local area would know them and they'd be more eager to buy tickets to see them as opposed to somebody they don't know. That's how it was back then. However, Coach Red Auerbach and the rest of the Celtics management who held the first pick that year decided to not do that. The fans wanted them to select local star Bob Cousy, but instead they used the #1 pick to draft a big man named Chuck Scher. Auerbach stated his reason for choosing Scher. Quote, "We need a big man. Little men are a dime a dozen. I'm supposed to win, not go after local yokels." Funny enough, Cousy would force his way to the Celtics anyway, and Scher would get traded shortly after the draft. In fact, Scher refused to sign with the Celtics, so they traded his draft rights to the Fort Wayne Pistons in exchange for Bill Sharman. So how did this trade turn out? Well, Bill Sharman went on to become an 8-time All-Star, 4-time champion, a key player for the Celtics, the first dynasty in NBA history. As for Chuck Scher, he played 8 unspectacular seasons as a role player for 3 different teams. Usually came off the bench and averaged a career 8 points per game. Looks like the Celtics made the right choice in trading him away, because Bill Sharman was such an important piece on their squad. History would have looked so different had they kept Chuck Scher. 1957, Hot Rod Hundley. The Rochester Royals, well actually this was the last year they played in Rochester, as they relocated to Cincinnati in that summer. With the #1 pick, they took Hot Rod Hundley, but shortly after, Hundley got traded in a package involving 7 other players, sending him to the Minneapolis Lakers. Unfortunately, none of the players the Royals got back stayed for more than 1 season, so this trade was a complete loss. However, Hundley also had a very short career too. In the 6 years he played for the Lakers, he was quite underwhelming as well, and retired at the age of 28, due to lingering injuries. He did make a couple of All-Star teams though. So yeah, this trade didn't really matter too much. It didn't have much, if any, impact on the NBA landscape, as all players involved were kinda insignificant. 1980, Joe Barry Carroll. Perhaps the most significant time a #1 pick got traded. It greatly changed the outlook of both teams. The Celtics held the first pick of the draft and they decided to make an interesting trade proposal. They offered the Warriors the first pick along with the 13th pick in exchange for the Warriors' 3rd pick and Robert Parrish, who at the time was a rising star. The Warriors accepted, and the Celtics used that 3rd pick to draft Kevin McHale. McHale and Parrish, along with Larry Bird of course, would form a prominent trio for the Celtics' 1980s championship run. Without this trade, I doubt the Celtics would win those titles. As great as Larry Bird was, he needed McHale and Parrish. They were the most important players after him. On the other hand, the Warriors used that #1 pick they got from the Celtics in order to draft Joe Barry Carroll. He had a very good career, eventually becoming an All-Star with multiple seasons of scoring 20+ points a game. The problem was, his teams were always terrible and they never got anywhere in the playoffs. Individually, Carroll was solid, but there's no comparison to what the Celtics got in return. Honestly, it just shows how well the Celtics organization has been managed ever since the team existed. In every decade, in every era, they've always had great executives, a smart GM, a good coach. Those are the things that make or break a franchise. It's trades like these that make the difference between a good organization and a great one. 1986, Brad Doherty. When you think of the 1986 NBA draft, I think the first guy that comes to mind is Len Bias. The death of Len Bias, what could have been such a great career, ended before it even began. What got overshadowed was a trade where the Sixers sent the #1 pick to the Cleveland Cavaliers in exchange for Roy Hinson plus cash. At the time, it seemed reasonable for the Sixers to do this. They were transitioning from the Dr. J era to the Charles Barkley era and needed more experienced players to build around Barkley. Hinson was young, but he was a proven commodity, as he just had a season averaging nearly 20 points a game. Plus, the team needed another small forward once Dr. J retired. Selecting a rookie in the draft, even if they were the #1 pick, could be risky, so the Celtics chose to give it up for a proven player. It was the wrong choice. Hinson spent barely over a season in Philly as he did not fit in and had frequent arguments with his coaches. For the Cavs, they used the #1 pick they got back to draft Brad Doherty, who became the best player on those Cavs teams that made it deep into the playoffs in the late 80s and early 90s. Brad also came in hot and ready, immediately impacting the game. Had the Sixers kept the pick and took him, they would have had such a dominant front-court duo. Perhaps Barkley would have stayed in Philly longer too, since his biggest gripe was having no help. 1993, Chris Webber. The Orlando Magic drafted him and traded him to the Warriors on draft night for the 3rd pick, Penny Hardaway, along with 3 future first-rounders. The Warriors got fleeced, cause Webber only played a single season for them, as he ran into issues with coach Don Nelson. Nelson had a vision that Webber should play center, despite being undersized. He saw a future where a faster, small ball style of play would dominate the NBA, and Webber with his size and ball handling skills would flourish in his system. I mean, he was right, but he was a few decades too early. Webber did not like the system and preferred a more traditional role at power forward, hence why he demanded a trade. As a result, the Warriors essentially lost Penny and 3 future first-rounders for a single season of Chris Webber, although they would get back some of those picks after trading Webber to the Bullets. The Magic made out like bandits though. Penny and Shaq quickly became the league's most beloved young duo, as they led the franchise to their first ever appearance in the finals. They wouldn't stay together for long, and Penny suffered numerous injuries throughout his career. But you gotta wonder, what if the Magic never traded Webber? What would a Webber-Shaq frontcourt look like? With Webber's passing and versatility, he'd play off Shaq so well. Plus, they were friends off the court too, so maybe Shaq would have stayed a few more years in Orlando. 2014, Andrew Wiggins. It would be over 20 years later when another first pick finally got traded. This time, it's the one we all know about. The Cleveland Cavaliers traded Andrew Wiggins for Kevin Love. Some rumors have said that LeBron had a hand in doing this, as he told the Cavs to acquire another All-Star so they can compete right away when he returned. I'd say it worked out well for both teams, actually. The Kevin Love experiment in Minnesota was not working out, and after 6 years, they both needed a fresh start. Love, despite the rough start in Cleveland, they couldn't have won the championship without him. For Wiggins, he didn't live up to what everyone expected, but he's not a bad player. He's still having a decent career. His time on the Wolves was underappreciated, and we examined him too closely under a microscope, simply because he's the #1 pick. If this trade never happened and Wiggins ended up in Cleveland, he would have had such few opportunities to grow, especially on a team that needed to contend right away. So starting his NBA journey on the Wolves was not a bad thing, and hopefully he can keep building his career. 2017, Markelle Fultz. The most recent time the #1 pick has gotten traded. In 2017, the Celtics held the first pick and had a decision to make. They could use it to take the consensus first pick, Markelle Fultz, the player that most scouts believed had the highest ceiling. However, the Celtics never intended to draft him. Right from the start, they had their eyes set on Jason Tatum. Their decision to trade down for the third pick to get Tatum wasn't seen as a downgrade from their perspective. Everything worked to their favor. Tatum quickly blossomed into one of the league's premier small forwards, while Fultz had numerous problems just trying to stay on the floor. His nerve damage in the shoulder proved to be a heavy burden to overcome, and he has yet to find a solid footing in the NBA thus far. When the Boston Celtics, specifically Danny Ainge, chose to draft Tatum, it came with the belief that the NBA is moving towards this direction of favoring versatile wing players over a point guard. Ainge believed the Tatum-Brown pairing would be the duo of the future, and he wasn't wrong. It seems like a coincidence that all the best trades involving the first pick, the Celtics always came out on top. Or maybe it's not a coincidence. Their front office is just that smart. The Celtics also got a future first-rounder in addition to Tatum, although that turned out to be Romeo Langford, not exactly a promising player. Still, this trade catapulted the Celtics back into contender status sooner than we expected. Anyway, that's all folks. Those were 7 times when the first overall pick got traded around draft night. It's happened such a small number of times in NBA history, but most of the time, when it does happen, it's pretty significant. All of these trades have had varying degrees of effect on their respective teams. Most of them are also one-sided. There's a clear-cut winner in trades like the Fultz one or the C. Webb one, Brad Doherty or Joe Carroll. Others, not so much. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on trading away the first pick. Do you think it's a decision that's going to be more common in the future, or less common in the future? Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.